Hello guys.
Vi er klar.
Check, check, check. Check. Alright. Hello guys. I would like to give sort of one little last present from Manfreds, and that is the Manfreds Tartar recipe for something that you can make at home, since you can't join us at Manfreds any longer in the future. I do hope that we will be able to resurface the tartar at Mirabel maybe at one point, but for now, considering lockdowns and current situations, you can cook it at home. So the tartar is extremely simple, that's why it's been so successful. But to go through the ingredients that we have lined up to make it, we have obviously the meat. The meat needs to be quite lean, not too fatty, and particularly not too sinewy. I have watercress of a fair quality here, and then I have puntarelle, which looks a little bit more fresh, and depending on the season you can do whatever you want. What's key is to have something that gives it bitterness and a bit of a crunch. The tartar rests on a little mayonnaise that we will make with the soft-boiled eggs, the oil, mustard, a bit of lemon, crispy rye bread on top. Let's get to it. First things first, we'll have our meat, and we will cube this into smaller bits. It's essentially just the size that your meat grinder can deal with. Now what I like is that you have a texture of kind of small bits of meat. When I came to think of this particular way of making the tartar, it came from experiments with making charcuterie. And when you do charcuterie, you want to grind the meat at the coldest temperature possible. So you cut it, you dress it with the salt that you need for the curing, and season it if you have any particular spices or anything, and then you put it in the freezer to get it almost shell frozen. So as it grinds, it comes out almost as uniform as possible, but not too mushed up. What you don't want is meat that gets pushed through the meat grinder. It needs to get cut clearly. So obviously you need a good meat grinder that I also suggest that you put in the freezer as well for a bit, as long as you can. And then the meat cut up, we add the salt, the 1.5% of salt for the amount of meat. It's not crucial. What you can do is you can just eyeball it a little bit as you would season your meat for whatever purpose. You have to understand, a lot of raw meat really needs a lot of seasoning, or it is not gonna be very interesting. So I'm just gonna mix it up like this a little bit, and then I'm gonna put it on a plastic tray, or spread it out a little bit so it cools down as fast as possible. And I'm gonna whack it in the freezer. While the meat is cooling down in the freezer, we will go ahead and prepare the sort of mayonnaise that is on there. We'll call it an egg cream. For our home version, a soft-boiled egg that is cooked for 5 minutes is absolutely perfect. So we add that to the little jar, a little bit of sourdough bread, a good amount of Dijon mustard. We'll add to it. Again, this is something that I think is extremely important for you know, to counter the meat that is very umami and rich. You have something that sort of cuts through it. That's the same effect you get from the cress or the bitter leaves, but this mustard is absolutely crucial. Then we add a good bunch of lemon juice here. At the restaurant, we would sort of mix the bread and the lemon juice for a bit and let it sit and soak up. But we don't have time for that kind of stuff. So we're gonna go straight up mixing it together and then start blending a little bit. As I've combined these ingredients, and I'm gonna add a little bit of salt just to get this emulsion started off properly. Because when you have the eggs, you have egg yolks, you have the salt, and you have the acidity from the lemon juice, you can start adding your oil to the. And then with my bottle, I'm just gonna start pouring it. A little bit careful in the beginning. If you go for a bigger amount, I would for sure recommend a blender of some sort. But this setup for a small amount, for maybe 3-4 people, makes you the right amount or the right proportions between the blender and the glass, and just being able to use one egg is kind of meaningful. But of course, you can always get a lot of mayonnaise, which is not bad. I don't like using olive oil for something like this because I believe that the oil should be neutral, so that you can play with the flavors that are in there without the olive oil taking over. I think olive oil should be left on its own and as little manipulated as possible, not cooked, not anything. But here, just a regular plant oil, sunflower seed or rapeseed, something that is just organic, of course, but doesn't bring flavor to it. It just needs to bring the texture and the fattiness for the emulsion to work. You see, it's thick, has the right texture. Need a bit salt, a bit more salt, and a bit more acidity. A mayonnaise should be full on with both mustard and acidity, because it is fatty by its nature, and you need those things to really have the flavors come through. About 45 minutes have passed since the meat went into the fridge. Just enough time for you to pop a bottle of wine and get ready for the next step. It should be more or less frozen, because that's not the point. You just want it to firm up as much as possible. That's perfect. Maybe the middle bit here could have been frozen a little bit longer, but once you pop the wine and you see yourself eating tartar, sooner or later you just have to grind the meat. This is good to go. Trying to keep everything cold. Again, I was doing charcuterie tests, or my first sort of experiments with it back in the day at Relay, and that's how this whole idea started. And what you want is to sort of mimic the process of getting meat ready for stuffing. And what you want to do is you want to get it really cold, so that when you grind it, you do not heat it, because it's different with beef, I suppose. But when you have pork fat going, the fat, if it gets heated, then it starts melting and it causes a lot of issues for your charcuterie. We can go a little bit high speed, and the temperature of the meat helps it getting cut rather than getting mushed. As you can see, you have big strands of meat. There we go. Make sure it goes a little bit longer, because you might have some meat just sitting around in here. And if you touch this is ice cold, and it still stays ice cold. There wasn't a lot of meat that we're grinding, but clearly if you're making a bigger portion, this would be even more important. At this point, there's only one step left, and that is the one of dressing and setting up the dish, I suppose. Egg cream here, which is ready to go. Before I start seasoning, let me get the plate ready. I like to have a bit of this in the bottom of the plate, and that's because when you sort of you can sort of choose how much you want to mix it yourself with the mayonnaise. When you do a traditional style tartar, you have it. Let me do 2 bowls. When you do a traditional style tartar, you mix the meat up with a bunch of stuff. Here, it makes a lot of sense for me to have all those creamy components mixed into the meat. But what I like is that you set it up in a way that you can do it on your own in the way that you want it to be, and that it doesn't become overwhelming. I also like that the meat is presented as it is, very raw, but very much in your face. On top of this, I'm gonna put a bit of this toasted rye bread crumbs. This could be normal crumbs too, It could be crushed up croutons or whatever you want. What's important is that you have a crispy bread element. I have the meat here. The meat needs to just get seasoned. The 1.5% for the meat is just barely noticeable. And it's nice to just keep it to that and then get some of these flakes in there, again for texture, against the meat. Grind some black pepper into it. Then I'm gonna take my leaves. I have the puntarelle. Crush it up a little bit. What you want is bitterness. Nasturtium leaves can be good, and also if you want you can add maybe spinach or something that is a little bit more crunchy. Start adding a good amount of olive oil. This is where olive oil comes into play. It's raw, it just gives you this grassy finish. I think it's extremely important for this. And then a good amount of lemon juice. And mix this up together. Try it out. Maybe a bit more pepper. And here we start plating it up. Try and get some of that, some of those green leaves dispersed into it. Last thing, a little sprinkle of the rye bread, and then I like a little bit of black pepper to finish off. And here we go.